This is the Energy and Utilities Finance and Policy Committee. It is 3 o'clock on Tuesday, February 23rd, 2021. We've got a couple of items on today's agenda. One is a presentation on advanced nuclear reactor technology and the future of carbon-free generation. We've got a couple individuals to talk to that, and then we'll move on to Senate File 225, Senator Kiffmeyer's bill on a nuclear moratorium ban. So we'll start at this point with hearing from the folks that want to talk to us a little bit about nuclear energy, and we'll just turn it over at this point to Ashley Feehan. Ms. Feehan, would you introduce yourself and proceed with your testimony?
Thank you very much, Senator. My name is Ashley Feehan. I'm the director of the National Reactor Innovation Center at Idaho National Laboratory, and I'd like to introduce my co-presenter, Christine King, who's the director of the Gateway for Accelerated Innovation in Nuclear, or GAIN, which is also a national DOE program run out of Idaho National Laboratory. And now I'll turn it over to Christine to start the presentation, and then I'll finish up. And I'll also ask first whether the committee has the slides that we sent ahead, or shall we share them on the Zoom call?
Mr. Lee?
The committee does have them, and I have them here as a backup in case there's a problem, but we'd prefer if you share your screen and then you can advance your own slides if that's possible.
Great. Christine, do you have those, or do you want me to try to pull those up?
I have them up, Ashley. Give me just 1 second here. Okay, let's see. See if I have permission to share. Okay.
There we are. We have the slides, Ms. King. Please introduce yourself and proceed.
Okay, excellent. So again, I would like to also say thank you very much for the opportunity to talk with you guys today. I joined the GAIN.
Just for the record, could you introduce yourself for the file?
Sure, I'm Christine King. I'm the director for the Gateway for the Accelerated Innovation in Nuclear. We are a DOE initiative homed at Idaho National Labs. However, we do work on behalf of all the national labs doing nuclear related work. So just to give you a little bit of background about myself, prior to joining the National Lab, I worked in private industry with the existing light water reactor fleet. I've focused my career on pressurized water reactors in particular, and with a specialty on materials degradation. I came to the Gateway for Accelerated Innovation in Nuclear realizing the importance of the public-private partnership in our success in deploying a new fleet of reactors. And I wanted to be at a place and be to affect that in particular. With that, what we plan to talk about today, if you haven't had a chance to look ahead in the slides, is really just kind of skip the rock across the water a little bit here on a few topics around advanced reactors, not meaning to dig deep into any one particular reactor technology, but to give you some familiarity, to give you a little bit of an overview. Just taking a step back, electricity generation is really only one piece of the net zero puzzle. It's responsible for about 25% of the US carbon emissions today, but we also see electrification as a central strategy for decarbonizing the transportation sector going forward. Transportation today is already responsible for about 30% of the carbon emissions, meaning if we electrify transportation, the electricity demand will increase over the coming decades. So looking beyond electricity, though, to charge cars, an opportunity that maybe we don't use of the current existing fleet is the thermal heat from a nuclear reactor that can be used to produce hydrogen. Currently, hydrogen is primarily produced through the steam methane reforming process with natural gas. By using nuclear reactors to create the heat necessary for the electrolysis of the water, we can completely decarbonize the hydrogen production process, giving us yet another fuel to use in the future. We do have several demonstration projects underway showing how the existing nuclear power plants could pivot in this manner. Finally, continuing on with the thermal energy from the nuclear power plants, we could use that in what you might call the hard to decarbonize sector of industrial processes. And this is really tuned to the advanced reactor fleet, where we can look at either the production of high quality steam or direct heat to be supportive to some industrial processes. So I tend to start with these by thinking about beginning with the end in mind and working backwards to a particular technology. Okay, there we go. So why advanced nuclear? This study, the link is provided here in the slide if you'd like to go read more details about it. It was produced by E3 for Energy Northwest in Washington State. This study specifically was looking at how to get to zero emissions by 2045. The literature here consistently shows that including farm power resources dramatically increases the cost associated with achieving zero emission. If you look, the current capacity is around 60 gigawatts. To get to zero emissions with renewables and batteries, that would be your first column here. And in that case, you would be adding about 90 gigawatts of capacity. If you extend the license of the current nuclear reactor in Washington, Columbia Generating Station, it does get a little bit smaller. If you add in small modular reactors, it gets smaller still. So this is just one study that's out there. There are many states exploring similar types of study, understanding what carbon-free generation sources help them not only to achieve carbon-free, but also balance the cost associated with that build-out. So you might ask, that's a nice study, but where is the product beyond the large light water reactors you might be familiar with today? Advanced nuclear reactors are going to come in a variety of sizes, and they will also offer a variety of products. So I already talked about this a little bit in the introduction. So think about features like mobility and modularity, which you might be interested in for satisfying particular needs within a region or a community. And then you might consider the space that you have to locate that. So you might start to look at whether you want a small, medium, or a large size reactor. Small reactors tend to range between 1 megawatt and 20 megawatts. This tends to make them mobile. You'll hear them referred to as micro reactors. It makes them mobile and highly deployable. So for areas that maybe need off-grid resiliency, this might be a good solution in those spaces. Medium reactors run the range of 20 megawatts to 300 megawatts, and they commonly feature modularity, allowing the end users to scale up as your demand increases over time. Commonly, what you hear in commercial terms here might be a small modular reactor. Those can be non-light water reactor as well as light water reactor technology. Large reactors go up to 1,000 megawatts. Sometimes they're referred to as full-size reactors. This is what some of those are what you might be used to seeing today with cooling towers associated with them as well. The reactor type really does play a part in your deployment decision, depending upon the situation and the energy needs that you have. I've mentioned the demarcation around the coolant technology. The advanced reactors will come with different coolant technology. You'll hear molten salt, liquid metal, fast reactors, and gas-cooled reactors. Some of these designs offer the opportunity to consume existing spent fuel from the light water reactor fleet. All offer enhanced safety and a more flexible operating scheme than today's fleet. And many of them are considering how they can incorporate factory fabrication rather than on-site fabrication to improve the cost and deployment schedules associated with that. So the new advanced reactors will vary in size based on the location, the needs that you have, and the ability, and they have the ability to sync with renewable resources. I'm going to switch gears here a little bit and talk about GAIN, and then I'm going to turn it over to Ashley to talk about NREL. So GAIN, just a reminder for the acronym, that's the Gateway for the Accelerated Innovation in Nuclear. This initiative was started in 2015, and our purpose in life is to get up every day and consider what we need to do to ensure that nuclear is part of a clean energy future, and how we can best deploy the national lab assets to support private industry in achieving those goals as well. That's included everything from doing workshops to understand the R&D priorities that the developers have, as well as understanding end user needs. So this conversation today is important to inform our program as well and where we're headed. So thank you for that. Another aspect of our program, two key aspects. One, we work to release legacy data of previous demonstration projects that have been done to get that data in a modern digital format so that it's usable by private industry in their work today. Second piece of what we do is we have what's called a nuclear energy voucher program. This allows private industry to come with a work scope and have that work executed by national lab staff. It is co-funded by private industry in an 80-20 cost share. These projects are meant to turn quickly, so we like them to be under a year in scope and typically run about $500,000. The idea is to identify the hard spot that maybe an advanced reactor company is up against, and to deploy the national lab resources to help them get through that as quickly as possible. With those remarks, I'm going to turn it over to Ashley. And Ashley, just let me know when you're ready to go forward.
Okay, thank you very much, Christine. And again, thanks to the committee for the opportunity to speak with you today. Christine introduced GAIN and advanced reactors generally. I want to say a little bit more about advanced reactors and a little bit about NREC, the National Reactor Innovation Center, and our role in this vision. So Christine, if you want to go to the next slide, that would be great.
Whoops, sorry.
Perfect. So this timeline shows some of the key opportunities that we foresee in U.S. advanced nuclear energy in the coming years. First, we see microreactors demonstrated by the end of 2025 with deployment following that shortly. And Christine described microreactors as these very small reactors that can be deployed in niche applications, including critical infrastructure, including some Department of Defense applications, but also remote villages and areas like mines in remote areas where you really need to have power on site. Then we see the versatile test reactor, which would give the US a world-leading capability to do science in materials, in medical innovations, and in advanced energy R&D. And then larger advanced reactor demonstrations supported by a cost-share DOE program called the Advanced Reactor Demonstration Program. And then finally, a commercial operating small modular reactor in the late 2020s. That's the NuScale project in partnership with the UAMPS Municipal Power Service. So this is the picture of the near term in advanced reactors, the way we see it. And it's ambitious and it's very exciting. And some are doubtful that we can really accomplish all of this, but history counsels us to be more hopeful. We haven't done this recently, but we have done this before. At the National Reactor Testing Station in Idaho, the United States built 52 reactors over a period of about 25 years in the second half of the 1900s, so around 1949 into the 1980s. That catalyzed nuclear energy innovation in the United States and all around the world. The National Reactor Innovation Center, or NREC, is charged with doing that again, but a little bit differently this time. Next slide, Christine. So one of the ways that we're doing things differently this time around is really empowering innovators. This is a private sector driven effort, and NREC and GAIN and the rest of the National Lab Complex is here to help companies leverage government resources that exist and make sure that those facilities and resources are prepared for industry use, that we have the contractual mechanisms to help industry get efficient access to those facilities. But the demonstration resource network that we are working to provide includes test beds where innovators can test and demonstrate advanced technologies. It includes demonstration sites where they can do similar demonstrations of advanced reactors, as I showed on that timeline in the previous slide, as well as experimental and fuel facilities that are needed for some of the complementary technologies to support those projects. And then we're working on a couple of other items in regulatory risk reduction, modeling and simulation, and a resource team to help companies get access to lab expertise. Next slide, please. Another key modification this time around is addressing cost and markets. In the first wave of nuclear innovation, cost really wasn't top of mind, but now it's something we're really focused on because we're recognizing that affordability is pivotal to making sure that the solutions that we're demonstrating are scalable solutions that can answer the needs of the market in the future. One of the things that the literature and experience have shown over the past 5 to 10 years is that cost overruns in nuclear power projects are largely caused by project management failures and by civil construction issues. So steel and concrete, mostly putting those in the ground, is taking longer and costing more than we expect. So we have a few approaches to addressing those issues that we think will be transformative. Digital engineering is one. Digital engineering helps address project management challenges in part by integrating design, construction, operation, and analytics in a way that will streamline coordination amongst the various engineers and parties who need to come together to build an energy project, and it'll help avoid mistakes due to miscommunication or oversights. And we're seeing this in lots of other industries, but it really hasn't been used in nuclear yet. So we're pioneering that, and I think it'll make a big difference. Another area is advanced construction technology, like a vertical boring technology, which is shown in the picture on the left, or steel bricks shown on the right. Those can reduce the time and cost associated with excavation and with building. And we're working with industry to demonstrate some of those for nuclear energy use. And finally, integrated energy systems. That's the way we think about the future of energy use. Today, we have various generators and they feed into the grid. And maybe we have some other demand response and we have some spinning reserves and other flexibility at the margins. But in a future more efficient and fully decarbonized system, we envision a variety of generators, fast response generators, firm and variable renewable generation, really working together to support our energy needs, both on the grid and also off of it. So for example, Christine described using nuclear for hydrogen production. We could have nuclear producing electricity when electricity is needed, but if, for example, we had a lot of wind during a particular time period, you could shift your nuclear plant to produce hydrogen. And we've actually seen a US leader in this area in Minnesota at the Prairie Island plant. They're one of the nuclear plants that are demonstrating the carbon-free hydrogen production that Christine described. Next slide, please. And then this final diagram here shows a flexible nuclear industrial system concept that shows how nuclear heat and electricity can be used to produce hydrogen, as well as other products that can support decarbonized water supply, transportation, and a variety of other industries, including agricultural and extractive industries. So we see this as a big opportunity, and nuclear as a major player in decarbonizing not just the grid, but our entire energy system in the future. And then Christine, if you want to switch to the next slide, I'll let you close the remarks and we can go to Q&A.
So again, we thank you for the opportunity. We realize we're just skimming the surface on advanced reactors and how it might fit into a decarbonized energy future. What I would like to offer is GAIN is going to be rolling out next week at what we call an energy calculator. There's a lot of models that end in a 200-page report. Maybe these 200-page reports have been submitted to you guys to read. But we've created a more approachable model that allows you to look at the consequences of your decisions on the demand side of the equation, as well as the generation supply side of the equation, allowing you to balance these in the context of getting the carbon reduction that you're looking for. So we hope that that tool is useful. We're open to feedback if you are able to use it. I'm personally a fan of it because I never like anybody to tell me what the answer is. I like to do the math myself. That's just my little thing. So hopefully you will be able to interact with that going forward. And I just, we've talked a lot about how we're supportive to private industry, but we're also here to help you as well. We know that as you're considering how you meet a decarbonized clean energy future, you may not have the information that you want at the ready. Don't hesitate, call. We will do our best to help you out. So with that, I'll turn it back over to the Senator. And again, thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you so much to both of you for your presentation today. Let me just start out with a question. What do you see as the practical application of nuclear energy going forward as a power production mode? Again, either for generation of electricity or hydrogen or whatever. Nuclear energy is these plants are expensive to build. You see a more micro kind of approach to nuclear energy, or what do you see? What is your vision?
So I think I think what we're gonna see is a lot of differences based on the needs in particular regions. And I think that's because you have to consider near term. I think we're going to continue to see an influx of renewables on the grid, and that growing as a percentage of our carbon-free generation. And what I see in the future is nuclear energy will be a continued player in carbon-free electricity generation. But as I mentioned in the beginning, I think as we electrify more processes, we're going to need to provide more electricity. And that's where I think nuclear plays a significant role in helping to balance that. Again, we won't have just one type of reactor going forward. And I think that's the beauty of nuclear energy going forward as well. How we decide to use hydrogen, and maybe Ashley, I'll turn it over to you after I finish this remark if you want to add on. I think it's unclear exactly where and how we might use hydrogen in some of our processes as an alternative fuel going forward. Nuclear offers, though, the opportunity to look at that differently and to have that produced in a carbon-free manner.
Thank you. Ms. Fina, do you want to comment any further, or we just move on to another question if you want? If you don't have any further. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll move on. Members, questions? And speak out, because I don't have the whole.
Senator,
there we
I have
are.
a question, Mr. Chair.
Thank you so much, Senator Eric. Please proceed.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. And as I have been looking into the, possible nuclear ideas and seeing this kind of that micro and the small nuclear coming forward, and Ms. King, you alluded to it earlier in your testimony about the potential of reusing, spent rods and fuels from the current plants that we have. And is that something that is looking viable for both the micro and kind of that mid-size? And is that something that we're working on and developing an affordable way to reprocess that spent fuel and reuse it and get even more energy out of it?
Proceed, whoever wants to answer.
Ashley, do you want to take that one?
Sure, absolutely. That's a great question. Thank you. So I think it sounds like that our spent nuclear fuel contains more than 90% of the usable energy still in that fuel. So it's really a resource in a lot of ways if we make the decision to move forward with technologies that can reuse that fuel. And indeed, advanced reactor technologies do envision reusing spent nuclear fuel or used nuclear fuel again and recycling it. And I think that that we'll see, we have to demonstrate the technology, that it's real, and give people confidence that advanced nuclear can work. And I think we'll do that in the next few years. Those companies looking farther forward are planning on recycling in many cases. And we're seeing an increasing interest from policymakers in that as well, at the Department of Energy as well as at ARPA-E. So I'm really optimistic that we will see continued innovation in that space, or actually rekindled innovation in that space in this decade. And we'll get to new processes that can be economic and really work for us in the future to recycle that fuel.
Thank you. Members, any other questions? I have one for Ms. King. As a former venture capitalist, what does the investment industry, so to speak, how do they look at this?
So I think it's a challenge. I think if you think just strictly about venture capital does tend to turn a return on investment faster than a nuclear project would require. So we are, but I think as you look at as corporations and family funds are looking at how they might invest their money, either for ESG, environmental, social, and governance metrics, as well as in impact investing specifically targeted at climate change solutions. I think we're seeing an interest grow. What Ashley's organization is doing, partnering with the private companies, and what we're doing in public-private partnerships is, I think, most important to sealing the deal eventually on getting more private investment in this area. we need to demonstrate these technologies. They need to become real and off the paper so that we can touch and see them and understand what they're capable of. And I believe, you know, as we showed that demonstration in the next 10 years, I think this is the decade of demonstration. And then I think we'll be quickly moving into commercialization. So I do think that we will see more people coming forward, recognizing that not just nuclear, but many climate innovations needed are going to need more patient capital. And I think they might start to develop more financial tools to address that.
Okay, thank you. Members, anyone else?
Another question,
yes.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Senator Eric.
Yeah, thank you. And I think this was alluded to a little bit in one of the testifiers, but when we look at, you know, Minnesota currently has 2 nuclear plants, and I believe you mentioned something about where you can repurpose these existing plants for some of this new technology. And is that something that you've found to be rather easy for these plants to make the switch, or would that maybe entail like a complete renovation and have to be down for a number of months to make that change? But you know, we know that the infrastructure is all there, the grid is already connected to those locations, and actually if we can repurpose fuel that's already sitting there on those sites, it would be great sites to repurpose. Is that something that is being looked at and it sounds to be viable?
To whoever wants to take it.
I'll start, and then I'll see if Christine wants to add anything. So thanks for the question, Senator Rarick. In terms of repurposing the site, there is the thought that as the existing fleet begins to retire, there are license extensions happening, first and second license extensions. But then as they finally do retire, those are prime sites for potential advanced reactors to come in and continue to provide carbon-free power to a location where there is that grid connection. There's even a workforce and a community that understand nuclear energy. And then also the hydrogen projects that are being developed right now and the demonstrations that are happening now are at existing plants using electrolysis, so they don't need to retool very much. They can use Prairie Island to create hydrogen. As far as using the existing fuel, that will need some processing before it goes into another plant, before it's recycled. So whether that would happen on the same site, I'm not sure. That actually was demonstrated decades ago in Idaho, where fuel from the EBR-2 reactor was recycled on site and put back into the reactor. So it's been demonstrated, but I would expect that we'd probably see fuel move off site and be recycled before it came back into a reactor at the same site.
Okay.
And the only thing I'd add is relative to the hydrogen demonstration projects, there's 3 that are active right now in the United States. So one in Minnesota, one in Ohio, and one in Arizona. So there are other resources to reach out to, if you want to know more about, and we'd be happy to make those connections for you.
Ms. King, you mentioned that the nuclear technology needs to, if you will, demonstrate itself and over the course of the next 10 years. But the next 10 years would seem, at least, are going to be wound around a movement towards renewable energy. Do you think those involved in making these decisions are going to slow down long enough to take a breath and look at this? Is that reasonable to think?
Well, I think getting anybody to slow down these days is challenging, but that's a different problem we have with the information overload. We do recognize, and this is why Ashley and I are appreciative of having a moment. We know that the world is moving quickly towards addressing these clean energy goals, and these conversations are happening today. And it may be that near-term deployment of renewables is the right near-term actions. I believe you will achieve a tipping point, so to speak, where reaching net zero becomes much more challenging and costly without nuclear. And I think that's the message that we're hoping starts the conversation in this decade. And really, when you're thinking about how you get beyond that 75% carbon reduction to 100, I think that's really where nuclear becomes part of the equation. You guys have the benefit of having 2 nuclear reactors. And one of the roles I see for the existing fleet is for them to extend their licenses and give us as much runway as we can get. And that's not just runway for nuclear, that's runway for this whole transition away from fossil fuels.
Okay, thank you very much.
Mr. Chair.
Senator Matthews.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I just wanted to make a brief comment. I've been in Idaho at some NCSL energy seminars, and we got a chance to hear in depth on some of the modular nuclear technology and what's coming forward in the future. And it's very intriguing, and I think it absolutely needs to be something that we allow ourselves to consider. So I think at some point, Minnesota needs to have a serious discussion about repealing the nuclear moratorium in this state, because we've decided that this tool is not allowed in the toolbox. And I don't know if it's the right tool or the wrong tool in Minnesota, but I think we should at least have it in the toolbox to see if it's a potential solution, as we have our 2 older plants now, and the company's trying to figure out what the future of those 2 plants will be exactly. But I think that there's a lot of exciting opportunities in the little bit, I'm sure, that I learned that was explained to me in my presentation. Really whet my appetite for. I think this should be something that states take seriously and look into and see if it is a working solution in their areas.
Great. Thank you, Senator Matthews. Well, what like a perfect segue to Senate file and back. Let me just thank our presenters today, and outstanding job, and there's certainly thought-provoking from the standpoint of looking to the energy future. So we really appreciate you coming on today and being part of it. You can stick around if you'd like, but if you want to leave, you're certainly welcome to do that as well. So with that, then let's move on to Senate File 225. Senator Kiffmeyer, having to do with the repeal, if you will, of the nuclear power ban in Minnesota. So Senator Kiffmeyer, welcome to the Energy Committee and Energy and actually Utilities Finance Policy Committee meeting, and we welcome you here, and please do proceed. And you need to unmute.
Yeah, I did. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I'm very pleased to have time in your committee today. And I really appreciated the presentation that I had the chance to listen to just before. So it was really very helpful and very pleasant to hear of the innovations and the ideas that are going on. For the record, I'm Senator Mary Kiffmeyer, and the bill today is Senate File 225. And Mr. Chair, this is a really quite simple bill. It simply says, yeah, you can talk about nuclear power. Just kind of amazing to me that we have a situation here where even to talk about one type of energy, that we have a situation where you can't talk about it. So the effect of this bill says, yes, now the agencies, the entities, nuclear power overall, we can talk about it. The only place so far has been in a committee hearing that we've been able to talk about it. I think the important thing is to realize that this bill does not require the certification or the okay of building any nuclear power reactor whatsoever. What this bill says is you can talk about it. I think it's important to realize that. So it doesn't authorize new ones, doesn't do any of that. It simply says, now you can talk about it. So nuclear power itself, and I think you've had such a great presentation already, is the greenest, most renewable source of power. No air pollution, no CO2. I mean, if you're talking about green energy and you like green energy and you don't want to have CO2, nuclear power is the obvious and logical place to go with it. Matter of fact, in my research, I found that President Biden, Jennifer Granholm, have signaled some support for being part of the discussion. The Democratic Climate Committee report said that nuclear power should play a role. And I think that's the general tenor that you find, every which way you go, the recognition that while we value the wind and solar and all the power sources, we should have a diversified energy grid that is clean, cost-effective, reliable, base power, carbon-free, efficient, inexpensive, and realizing that all these kind of qualifications should be applied to every single source of energy. And I think that's an important consideration. So the main thing here is that we're lifting the gag law so that we can just talk about it. That's an important thing. What we're hearing in the committee today, conversation here, and the people of Minnesota deserve to have this kind of a conversation. Recently, I'll think of 3 instances, matter of fact, one of them just recently in Texas. And in Texas, they have 4 nuclear reactors. One of them, a pipe of water was an issue and it had to go into shutdown mode. The other 3 nuclear reactors were able to pick up the slack. And between the other 3, they were able to meet their goal of 100% of the power that they had committed to generating. Doing that on 3 would have been much better if they'd had more nuclear reactors, and they would have been able to have not had some of the damage and some of the issues. Certainly when you saw the frozen solar gardens and you see the windmills not able to function, it's a real issue and it's a real matter of public safety. We can't afford to be so ideological that we ignore the people and the importance of energy, that what it plays in the role that we have. In my district, or just north of my district, in Princeton, they had a time where there was a shortage of, I believe it was either natural gas was at the time, and they had committed to, and we had a severe cold snap. And so people didn't have enough energy in order to heat their homes. In Minnesota, that's a really big deal in the situations that we've come through. And so I think we do have a number of areas where we recognize the base load power. And right now, batteries are not there in regards to the storage of the power to give us that kind of base load. And so right now, most important thing is to realize that we do need a transition. But not only that, in the end, putting all our eggs in one basket is not a good idea. Having a diversified source of energy that is clean, that is efficient, that is cost effective, that is reliable. And I think that nuclear power absolutely fits in that. But the main thing that this bill does here right now is that this bill allows us to talk about it. And certainly in Minnesota, we should not be shutting off any conversations about any source of energy in such a crucial time. And I don't really see, Mr. Chair and members, that we're going to reduce our need for energy to a certain extent. All the computing power you will find, I know that Senator Matthews and Google taking a look at the Becker area, one of the biggest things is source, access to the high amount of energy that they need in the computing power, and also for the cooling of those high-speed type of computers. So, Mr. Chair and members, it's a very straightforward, very simple bill. Let the people talk about nuclear power. Let our agencies do their job. And one of the things I realized, the consequences of not having those conversations is that we're going to be stuck in the past. People's mindset about nuclear power is the old of the past, what it might have been in the past. And when you hear from the presenters that we had today, and they talk about the innovation, the modular reactors, the variability of sizes, that was the past. You didn't have that in the past, but we have it today. And it's a very valuable, very critical part of safety for our folks here in Minnesota and across the country, and being able to have access to, if nothing else, at least a honest discussion about nuclear power. So, Mr. Chair and members, very straightforward, simple bill. We're just lifting the fact that it can be talked about with the agencies. The nuclear power companies can talk about it. They can take a look at it. They can apply. They can apply for some of these innovative methodologies to work it out. And in regards to the spent power, I was able to tour a place where they actually did the recycling of those spent energy. And they were able to recapture the 90% and restore them and fix them up, put them back into production. So the innovation isn't just in the sizes of reactors, but also in the kind of use of the fuels and the variety of them. That's exciting. And I don't think Minnesota should be left out of this kind of innovation and this kind of opportunity for our Minnesota people. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, members. I'll be glad to answer any questions on this matter.
Thank you, Senator Kiffmeyer. Members, are any questions of the author, Senator Kiffmeyer, at this point? Senator Torres-Ray, and followed by Senator Friends.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do have a question, maybe for Senator Kiffmeyer or for the staff. I would like to understand, we just had a presentation that went deeply into nuclear power and how important it is and all of that. So what does the legislation do? What we can talk about it, we just did. We had a presentation that was pretty lengthy and in depth. We can do that anytime, right? We can have these presentations, we can have these conversations, we can have forums, hearings. Could you clarify to me what your legislation does that would be different from what we are able to do right now?
Senator Kiffmeyer, please proceed, or if you'd like Ms. Fontaine to help you out from the attorney side, she could probably help you out there as well. But Senator Kiffmeyer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I may call a lifeline there to Ms. Fontaine or have her add information, certainly very valuable. But Mr. Chair, as the author here, the bill simply says, strikes the language that says the commission may not issue a certificate of need for the construction of a new nuclear power electric generating plant. And I think the recognition of this is, if you can't issue a certificate, it's generally been interpreted, you can't talk about it in the agencies where you would ordinarily go for this kind of, you apply for a certificate of need, and that initiates the conversation that you're going to have about it. So I think it's had a chilling effect. I think it's had a depressing effect in the fact that, well, if you can't even apply for a certificate of need, it's been generally considered and looked upon as a gagging of the ability to have a practical discussion. We here in the legislature are having a wonderful discussion about potentials and innovations and so on, but we want to get it beyond that. We want to be able to have the agencies take a look at the nuclear power from an actual practical point of view. And without this bill, I don't believe they can do that. And that, I think, is the essence. But Mr. Chair, I'd be glad to have Ms. Fontaine weigh in on this as well.
Ms. Fontaine, anything else that you have on your mind on this question?
No, Mr. Chair, members, and Senator Torres-Ray, I think what Senator Kiffmeyer is saying is correct, that this section of law has really just been called the nuclear moratorium, that no business or proposer could bring a proposal before the Public Utilities Commission to propose a new nuclear facility generating plant. And so, as Senator Kiffmeyer mentioned, the only conversations have been recently, as bills have been brought forward and had committee hearings to talk about whether it should be lifted, whether it should be part of the conversation about what is carbon free and should it be part of the mix. And so really nothing can come before the PUC as far as issuing a certificate of need, and no businesses would even entertain it as far as a Minnesota proposal. And so the thought behind it is just that if you get rid of this, then a business might consider building a new nuclear generating plant.
Senator Torres-Ray, follow up, any questions yet on your question that you might have, Senator Torres-Ray? I sense not.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that I understood, because Senator Kiffmeyer talked about just the conversation. This is more than the conversation; it's just ending the moratorium, which is kind of a bigger piece. I just wanted to make sure that is on record. That it's not just now we're able to have a conversation, because we can have a conversation anytime. We're just lifting the moratorium, and this is what this legislation does. So thank you to the staff. Thank you, Senator, for clarification. I just wanted to have that on the record. Thank you.
Thank you. Maybe Senator Kiffmeyer or Ms. Fontaine, just because I was going to ask this question later, maybe it's a good time. If this bill were to pass, the pursuit of a new nuclear power plant, whatever it might be, would still require PUC scrutiny and probably agency permitting scrutiny. Am I right there?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, if you're asking me or Ms. Fontaine.
Either Senator Kiffmeyer, I will accept that yes answer, and I think I saw Ms. Fontaine's head nod. Okay, Senator Frantz.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Senator Kiffmeyer. We touched on nuclear early in this committee, and I'd like to start by trying to agree with both you and Senator Torres-Ray. I think what Senator Torres-Ray is saying is that the only place you can't talk about it now is the PUC, and I think your point is that's where you'd like to talk about it. So I think you both have points that are worth outlining. My feeling, Mr. Chair, is that we have two different discussions here. One is, should we lift the nuclear moratorium? I'm not ready to do that. I think the reasons that we had it are in place, but as I've said to Senator Matthews, I think it's got to be part of the discussion, and my feeling is the legislature is the place to begin those discussions. A second question is, where does nuclear fit in to our longer term energy plans in Minnesota? That relates to issues such as cost and safety, and I think there is no better place to hash those out than the legislative committee process, which I believe is a proper place for us to bring witnesses forward like this and sort of develop the conversation. I note that amongst the materials the chair provided to us are opposition to this bill from Prairie Island, Minnesota Environmental Partnership, Clean Water Action, Minnesota Center for Environmental Advocacy. And these are groups of Minnesotans that I hope we're listening to, as well as to Ms. King. And you know, I guess where I'd say is let's have some of these conversations at the legislative level to remove the nuclear moratorium at this point. I think it's a little premature, and I'll just throw this out there because these things are recorded and that way they never come back to haunt you. My greatest concern about nuclear is actually cost. And I agree that it is a carbon-free source, and I realize that we don't have a perfect answer for nuclear waste yet. But I'm a believer in American innovation. I think some things might be possible. And as we look around the country, cost is something that has, at least for the moment, derailed some of the nuclear planning, even where it's allowed. Long story short, Mr. Chair, I believe I'll be a no, but I thank Senator Kiffmeyer for bringing it forward. And I do think we have to have conversations about all our paths to carbon neutral by, I don't know, 2040, 2050, something in there. That's not in my crystal ball, but thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Senator Kiffmeyer. Thank you, members.
Thank you, Senator Frantz. Senator Matthews.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just to that point, I'd like to ask if Senator Frantz would answer a question for me.
Senator Frantz, will you yield? All right, he does.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You raised two good points of two distinct questions that need to be answered, and you laid it out very well. But I have a contention that I don't think you can get to question number two adequately until you deal with question number one, that we can't talk about the long-term planning of how nuclear would fit into the picture until we lift the moratorium so that we can have companies consider it. Because yes, the discussions do take place here in the legislature, but that is limited to a point. I mean, we run for election every 2 years or 4 years. Sometimes we don't have the same long-term vision that we need, and the companies that are making these builds and building these energy and helping deal with it on the business end often do those long-range plannings, 15-year IRPs way out into the future, much longer than most legislation that we deal with. So I guess I'd kind of like Senator Frantz to flesh out a little bit how he feels we can adequately get to question number two before dealing with question number one here with this moratorium.
Okay, Senator Frantz.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Senator Matthews. I think we're doing it right now, which is having a conversation about nuclear, and I thank you for the question, and here's my answer. In order to flesh it out, to have XL Energy, for example, look more closely, to have private industry study nuclear, and frankly, to have the advocacy groups weigh in whatever side of the issue they're on. I do not think we need to lift the moratorium. I think we can have those conversations everywhere in Minnesota except the PUC. And for what it's worth, I've had this conversation with the Department of Commerce, with members of the PUC, with members of the environmental community, and I've only been on the Energy Committee for 2 months. So I'm confident that we can have more discussions about the feasibility without lifting the moratorium. But to your question, that's because I don't believe there's any information, analysis, engineering that's out there that isn't being talked about. And if there is some, I'm willing to revisit that position. Thanks, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Senator Matthews. It's great being on the committee.
Senator Matthews, follow up?
Just a quick follow-up, and I appreciate that answer. Senator Frentz and I may have to agree to disagree here, because yes, we can talk about it, but I don't think we can do any serious planning on it. It'd be foolish for a business to talk about serious plans, time, resources, study into something that is forbidden here in the state of Minnesota. So I'm not sure that you can get much deeper than just the surface level of, oh, nuclear and it's nice, and oh, there's new technologies coming on and all of this. And I don't think the lifting the moratorium harms anything, because everything still has to meet the same standards before the PUC, the costs, the process, everything with that. So I appreciate Senator Frentz's perspective. We're going to differ here. I was hoping that that based on some of Senator Frentz's comments earlier this session, maybe we'd see some bipartisan support on bills like this, but there's always next year, just like the Cubs in the World Series, Mr. Chair. Maybe next year's our year to get Senator Frentz.
Okay.
Mr. Chair?
Senator Frentz.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I don't mean to prolong the hearing, but thank you, Senator Matthews. I think I understand where you're coming from, and I'd say now we're talking to each other. We're talking about how much planning can go on while the moratorium is still in effect. And I understand and respect what you're saying, which is there's planning and discussion that can't take place. And again, I'm open-minded to that possibility. It's not my perspective right now, but again, this is only the second month I've been on the committee. And for example, testimony from XL about analysis of nuclear that they are not able to do or unwilling to do because of the moratorium, I think that's relevant to this discussion. The bill comes to the committee today. I got to vote on it today. I'm a no today. We don't need to wait till next year. The Cubs could win the World Series in this discussion 2 weeks from now, for all I know. Thank you again, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Senator.
I hear no one bringing up the Twins. Senator Kiffmeyer, response to any of this?
Well, I didn't know that the Energy Committee could be so fun, Mr. Chair.
We're having fun.
I appreciate that. I think when we talk about talking about it, it's a practical conversation, not a philosophical one. And by lifting the moratorium, we get into the practical conversation. There's no way the legislature is made up of physicists and the engineers that you need to take a look at this. And without lifting this thing where they can't even apply for a certificate of need, my gosh, then you're certainly not going to be able to answer those questions. We in the legislature are a policy setting body. We are not a build it body. We are a policy setting body. And that's why we have agencies who have access to much of this information, much of this criteria, and those who could present to it. But the legislature is not made to build that. The legislature made to set a policy, and the policy can be, yes, we can lift and say, now you can consider a certificate of need. Now Excel says with that going on, we can invest the time and the resources to apply and to go for that process. Nuclear is a long term. It's base power right now. Very solid, very reliable, very dependable, and also flexible. It can produce more today and a little less tomorrow. Just a really creative kind of energy source. But the conversation in the legislature is policy setting, not build it. And I think it's important for us in the legislature to go to that step where we can have that practical discussion amongst the scientists and the business people. That is where the actual kind of diagrams and the practical considerations go to. We in the legislature are not made for that. We're policy setting. So I hope that right now we can recognize that and lift this moratorium so we can get on with the business of considering it in a practical way to the people who actually have the knowledge and expertise. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Kiffmeyer. Senator Kiffmeyer, I have a question that it's probably not a fair question. I'm not expecting that you would have an answer. I'm sort of asking you because maybe our broader audience knows, in fact, if you don't. But do you know Senator Kiffmeyer of Minnesota is the only state in the United States of America that has a moratorium at this point? Or if anybody out in our audience knows, perhaps they could text or email any one of us. Senator Kiffmeyer?
Mr. Chair, I do not know that question. Are we the only one? And I did my research. That's something that didn't pop up, but maybe Ms. Fontaine or other testifiers, or maybe Ms. Gorman might have information.
Is there anyone on the screen? Ms. Gorman's going to speak momentarily. If I see no one responding, so we'll just hold that question. Let's move on to testimony from our witnesses, starting with Ms. Gorman. Ms. Gorman, please introduce yourself and proceed with your comments.
Thank you, Chair, Mr. Chair, and Senator Kiffmeyer, members of the committee. Thank you for allowing me to provide this testimony today. And to your question, I know other states have had moratoriums in place, including Wisconsin and Kentucky and others. I believe most of them have been lifted, but I'll get some confirmation on that. And if not in time for this hearing, I'll get back to you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, my name is Pam Gorman-Prohaska. I've worked for Xcel Energy for over 30 years. I started my career in the operations side of the Prairie Island nuclear plant. And in my current role today, I work on nuclear policy and strategy at both the federal and state level. So today I'm here to offer some comments on the bill that would lift the moratorium. As I'm sure you know, Xcel Energy is on a path to reduce our carbon emissions 80% by 2030. We can achieve this goal by using technologies that we have today, wind and solar in combination with our nuclear and natural gas that can complement one another. And we're now more than halfway to delivering 100% carbon-free electricity by 2050. This plan will achieve this plan and keep our customer service reliable and our energy bills low. Our nuclear fleet at Xcel Energy is a cornerstone of our plan to reduce carbon emissions while also delivering that reliable and affordable electricity for our customers. Our 3 nuclear units are among the highest performing plants in the industry. In fact, the Prairie Island plant set an all-time generation record in 2020. All 3 of our units are also celebrating record long periods of operation. And once again, in the recent polar vortex, all 3 of our nuclear units were operating round the clock. But to make our long-term carbon-free vision a reality, we need policies in place that will support zero carbon dispatchable 24/7 technologies so that we can eliminate that last 20% of carbon from the electricity that we provide. We don't have to bet on any one of these technologies as none of them are ready today. But above all else, we cannot be successful in providing that clean energy unless it meets the fundamental customer requirements of cost and reliability. If we want to consider advanced nuclear as part of the solution, Xcel Energy also believes that used fuel and storage needs to be part of the conversation. On-site storage of our used fuel is highly regulated and monitored, and the Nuclear Regulatory Commission has licensed our storage facilities. However, our customers have paid the federal government to deliver a used fuel storage solution, and we continue to wait for them to deliver on this legal obligation. There are currently 2 companies that have applied to the Nuclear Regulatory Commission to host used nuclear fuel on an interim basis at their private facilities. Both of these applicants expect to receive their license from the NRC in 2021. These centralized interim storage facilities could be constructed and ready to receive fuel as early as 2025. Here at Xcel Energy, we're leading an industry task force to support these storage facilities, as well as transportation initiatives. We understand the importance of finding a used fuel storage solution, and we're vigilant in these efforts. At the same time, as we've all now heard a couple of different ways and times, it's possible that the advanced nuclear community could offer a solution to the used fuel dilemma. Some of the advanced technologies could utilize this used fuel from our existing reactors and turn them into a fuel source. I can tell you that Xcel Energy, we have no plans to build an advanced nuclear reactor today. We need advanced nuclear, as I think has been also brought up, to be affordable and reliable for our customers. And we feel we need a used fuel storage solution before we propose a new facility here in Minnesota. We continue to be interested in technologies that can be dispatched to deliver carbon-free energy, but it will not be successful if we can't maintain that affordable and reliable electrical system. It's crucial to our company and our customers that we maintain a mix of energy sources and that they are available 24/7. In closing, thank you for allowing me to provide this input. And thank you, Senator Kiffmeyer, for your ongoing steady support for our existing nuclear fleet, including the Monticello plant. As you know, we are proposing to extend Monticello by 10 years as part of our preferred plan with the Public Utilities Commission in order for us to achieve our 80% carbon reductions by 2030. So we look forward to continuing to provide that reliable and affordable nuclear energy. And with that, I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Gorman. Are there any questions of Ms. Gorman? Senator Matthews.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So Ms. Gorman, could you weigh in on some of the questions we were discussing earlier? A company like Xcel, and you indicated you have no plans today for any advanced nuclear technology, but at some date in the future, how much planning, how deep could you go into weighing out if it would be a viable option or not if the moratorium was still in place? Or does the moratorium need to be lifted before a company like Xcel could do any serious consideration as to whether or not it's a viable piece in the future?
Ms. Gorman, please.
Yes, Senator Matthews. I think that we're neutral when it comes to lifting the moratorium. We're focusing our efforts on the technological and financial issues that we need to deal with prior to building another nuclear plant. And that includes the removal of spent nuclear fuel from the state. So they're complicated engineering and financial issues that we need to deal with. And so that's where we're really spending our time and resources and focus is on that area for now. And then we'll see how it evolves. As we've already discussed, we have a plan that gets us to 80% reduction by 2030. And so again, we'll keep watching as technology evolves over the next decade, I think, as Christine King, Director King discussed in her remarks.
Senator Matthews, any follow-up?
Sure, and maybe it's too uncertain of a question to answer, and I'm fine on whether your position is supportive, negative, or neutral on it. I'm just curious as to how much planning could actually take place in effect before that, and I don't think the answer hit on that very much, and I recognize maybe it's not something that can be speculated on very closely, but that, I guess, is one of the questions that this committee is fleshing out as to how much prep work ahead of time could actually be done with the moratorium in place. And apparently there's differing opinions by members on this committee. Some think it's a lot and people like me thinks it's very little, but I want to know what the truth is in there somewhere. And so at some point we'll keep fleshing that out either today or in future hearings. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Ms. Gorman, not to pressure you, I don't know if you have any follow-up to that. If you don't, that's fine. We can move on to Senator Yatke.
Well, and again, I think what we heard from Director King is that a number of these advanced nuclear technologies are working with DOE on pilots and grants to evolve their technologies. So certainly we're working closely with the industry and watching that technology evolve. But I think right now we're in the mode of watching and understanding and again, making sure that the financial issues are addressed before we deal with any proposal to build a plant. And I think, we wouldn't invest in planning if the PUC can't approve a con. So that probably wouldn't make sense from our perspective.
Okay, thank you so much. Senator Yatke.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And since I looked this up, I see that Darren has emailed out the same information to all of us, but I had pulled up the screen here on the NCSL site with the question of, are we the only one to outright ban? And we are. New York has outright banned it in some areas of their state, and 12 other states have restrictions, but Minnesota is on an island of its own as far as a total outright ban.
Thank you very much for that. Any further comments, Senator Yatke?
No, Mr. Chair, thank you. That was it.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you for the information. Anyone else? Anyone else? Okay, let's move on then to Ms. Levin with the Sierra Club. Ms. Levin, testimony to the bill. Welcome to the committee.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair and Senator Kiffmeyer and committee members. For the record, I'm Margaret Levin. I'm the state director of the Sierra Club's Minnesota North Star chapter, and we represent 80,000 members and supporters who are working to help our state's communities flourish through environmental protection. We appreciate the chance to testify today regarding Senate File 225, and we strongly oppose lifting the moratorium on new nuclear plants here in Minnesota. For us, nuclear continues to pose grave risks. It negatively impacts environmental justice communities, threatens water resources, and leaves a toxic legacy that will burden future generations. That's why the Minnesota legislature first considered a moratorium on new nuclear plants all the way back in 1971. And the moratorium, which has now been in place for over 25 years, continues to be a wise and sensible step that says we can't further add to a problem that doesn't yet have an acceptable solution. Of course, one of our top concerns is safety. Our 2 nuclear plants are located on the banks of the Mississippi, where an accident could harm local communities and millions downstream. Besides reactor safety, the required long-term storage of high-level waste, and there is not a viable solution for that at this time, makes nuclear a uniquely dangerous energy technology. Nuclear is also an environmental justice issue. It causes radioactive contamination throughout its life cycle. That is especially affecting indigenous and low-income communities who live near uranium mines, mills, plants, and waste storage facilities. Another problem that has been referenced today is the cost of new nuclear proposals. The cost continues to increase while we see clean renewable energy becoming more affordable. And we know that those dollars could be used more effectively by investing in wind, solar, storage energy efficiency, and grid modernization, and can create many more jobs per dollar that is invested. But subsidies for nuclear divert that important investment from clean energy and the development of new renewable technologies. We're also concerned about impacts on Minnesota water resources and the communities that depend on them. Cooling at nuclear plants require significant amounts of groundwater, and thermal energy is already one of the largest users of water in our state. So in closing, nuclear is controversial for good reasons, and we know that much better solutions already exist for our power needs. Every dollar spent on nuclear is one less that could be spent on truly safe, affordable, and renewable energy sources. Having the moratorium in place does not mean we cannot talk about nuclear energy, but we do need to first address the risks and concerns. We agree with the leaders that came before us that until solutions can be found to answer these concerns, the nuclear moratorium should remain. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Levin. Are there any questions for Ms. Levin? I see none. Again, thank you very much. We'll come back if one arises, Ms. Levin. Let's move on to Mr. Morris, former State Senator Steve Morris. Welcome to the committee, and welcome once again back to your state Senate. Good to see you.
Well, thank you. I think it's all of our state Senate, right? We all are a part of it in some way. But thank you very much, Senator and Chairman Senjum. Thanks for having the opportunity to talk here a little bit and share some thoughts and concerns. My name, for the record, is Steve Morse. I'm currently the Executive Director of the Minnesota Environmental Partnership, which is a coalition of conservation environmental groups with more than 70 member organizations. And we have opposed the lifting of a moratorium for some time for several reasons. You'll see a letter in the packet that Senator Frentz referenced. And I also want to support the excellent comments by Ms. Levin. She did a very good job of overviewing the case about this law. I want to zero in on a few specific things. Number one, we totally agree about the decarbonization effort that's needed, that we need to electrify everything as we go forward, and also agree that nuclear is an important part of our mix currently, and we understand that. But I was there in 1994 and dealt with the controversy over the adoption and the allowance of the casks on the banks of the Mississippi River. And this was part of that deal that actually allowed these nuclear plants to keep functioning. So I would argue that this provision has been an important part, and we may not even have these nukes, but for this provision that said we're not going to create more, we're not going to build more of them in the future. And as Ms. Levin said, many of the arguments that were there in 1994 in a very, very contentious debate still stand for our concerns about nuclear waste. And number one, probably the most fundamental one that we have to deal with is what Ms. Gorman from Excel talked about, which is the dilemma of the waste. We really can't move on and have a serious discussion about nuclear waste if we still don't know what we're going to do with nuclear power. Excuse me. We can't move on with a serious discussion of nuclear power if we don't know what the waste is. This was a key driver in '94, and the issue has not gotten any better. At that time, we were told it was just a matter of a few years and we'd have a repository for storage of this waste. And that's why the Renewable Development Fund was put in place. We were supposed to move on soon and have this all taken care of. Well, that's been 27 years. And so I'm concerned when, again, I hear, well, some of the comments about, we envision reprocessing, reusing, planning for recycling. All of that talk is good. What we really need is the reality of what we do with the waste, because this waste is still on the Mississippi River floodplain. It's still next to communities that have historically been taken advantage of. It's right next to a Native American community in the Prairie Island instance. And so it really would be inappropriate to even think about doing something to add to this stockpile until we take care of what we have. And, what I heard about the discussion about the new technologies, which was interesting, and I appreciate the dialogue, and I think we should talk about these things. But it was all about basically how we create a bigger waste problem. There was no recognition of how we deal with the waste, how we eliminate the waste. It was about different ways that we can create more waste. And as we move forward, I think what we have to do is look for solutions that address our renewable energy issues, but they have to solve multiple. We can't solve one issue of climate by creating another issue of waste. And so we have to think about these things holistically. So we strongly oppose Senate File 225. We think it is not the thing we should be doing at this time. I would make one comment. There was a law in the books for a few years requiring the state to actually come up with a plan for how to become 100% carbon free. And I believe that was repealed a couple of years ago, but the state could set up a process and actually have a thoughtful analysis of what is our plan for moving to 100% carbon free by the year 2050 or even earlier. And that could be done and that should be done, but we don't feel it requires the repeal of this law. And I'll be happy to stand for any questions. And thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Mr. Morris. Any questions of Mr. Morris?
Yeah, Mr. Chair.
Senator Rarick.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And when listening to the comments about dealing with waste, I wonder, former Senator Morris, do you know what the plan is to deal with solar panels when they come to end of life, or the blades from wind turbines when they come to end of life? How are we dealing with those items?
Senator Morris, any questions or any comments on that one?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman, Senator Rarick. I really do not have a good answer to that. I think those are, things we should know. I do not know the answer to that right off the top of my head. But what I do know is that the high level radioactive waste that comes out of these plants is toxic for like 10,000 years. And so it presents a monumental problem that we've been dealing with decades and we've been incapable of addressing. And so I really feel it's of a different scale, but it's not to minimize the waste coming from the other facilities. And I think the other types of energy generation, I think we should address those as well.
Mr. Chair.
Senator Eric.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. And I think it's just, I think that I understand the waste for nuclear lasts longer. Part of this is, getting rid of the moratorium allows us to begin discussions and figuring out how we move forward with this. I find it, when we use those examples as the reason not to talk about nuclear and not to use that as an option, I sure hope, we focus so much on decarbonizing the atmosphere, we tend to lose sight about the social justice for the 10 and 12-year-olds who are forced into almost slave labor in other countries to get us the materials we need to do solar panels and wind generators. Those are things that until those things are brought into the conversation in equal ways, I really struggle to understand why we refuse to allow the discussion around nuclear. You know, it's easy to sit here and, you know, talk about what we want to do in a first world country to make our lives better, but we have to focus also then on these other countries and where we're getting those resources to do these things. So I just hope everybody keeps that in mind as we move forward on these discussions.
Okay, thank you, Senator Eric. Further questions of Senator Morris by committee members? I see none. Senator Matthews, to get us into the
Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much, Senator Morris. To get us into the final lap here, Senator Matthews, would you make a motion to the effect something along the lines that Senate File 225 be recommended to pass and referred to the general orders?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I'd be happy to make that motion.
Okay, so we have a motion on the table. Members' discussion on the motion. Any discussion on the motion? I would just add a couple of comments. I think we all generally know we're in an energy transition. As we move through this transition, yes, we're going to have a lot of wind and solar, perhaps hydrogen, things like that. But we're going to have, just because of economics, I think, at least certainly less coal. What the economics of natural gas will be looking forward, I don't know. But as volumes of that get less and less, the price is going to go up. We're going to be driven into, I think, new modalities, some of which we may not even be aware of today. But I think we always come back to this, what about the last 25%? Where is that going to come from? We even talk at times about the last 25% coming from carbon sequestration, things like that to get us, you know, to the goal, so to speak. Whether that can happen or not, we don't know yet. But I do think that the idea of keeping an option open, being able to plan it, and for goodness sakes, we're talking it's 2021. I'm old enough to know that 2050 is not far away. There's a lot of work, a lot of planning, a lot of thought, just a lot of engineering, et cetera, to do with respect to our whole energy grid and our energy power generation. There's a lot to do in Minnesota before 2050. And we probably ought to get on with it. And we probably ought not sequester, if you will, one modality legally within our statutes to prevent us from talking about it or even moving forward with it. So I will be supporting this initiative today. Any other members have any comments?
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Senator Fritz.
Well, first of all, thank you for the opportunity to have this discussion. I would just add to your comments that if we get some consensus on this committee about needing to decarbonize by 2040, I think that will have been a major achievement that every member on the committee can take credit for. And I think it makes it easier to talk about the various options if we have a collective commitment to that type of goal. It's been unclear to me in my years in the Senate whether or not we have an agreement that we need to decarbonize in that time frame. And I welcome discussions that would seek to find some common ground on that point. And I applaud you for your leadership in even saying that. So thanks again for the discussion and looking forward to the vote.
Well, thank you, Senator Fritz. I think we all know what Xcel Energy is attempting to do, and more recently Minnesota Power, and certainly Great River Energy is seemingly on a path. So did any,
I can't tell the purposes.
Whoops, would somebody either speak or mute? Senator, was that you, Senator Chamberlain? Okay. Okay. Any further discussion on the bill? If not, if you'll unmute and.
Senator, do you want to, maybe Senator Kiffmeyer has a final comment.
Oh, Senator Kiffmeyer, I'm sorry. Thank you so much. Yes.
Thank you very much, Senator Senjum. I so appreciate the time on the committee and the robust discussion that we've had here today. Without question, I think you've all made the case very well, and I look forward to an opportunity to present this concept further And I just would like to mention, when you talk about some of the issues that you deal with, I think that there is mining for the precious metals that are used in other types of energy production. We also have waste disposal in regards to windmill blades. They're absolutely huge and so far not recyclable. And you have all the solar garden materials as well. So waste treatment of that and making sure that we take care of it is an issue no matter what form of energy we have. Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. I ask for your vote and your support. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Senator Kiffmeyer. Members, if you will now unmute, I will call the question A and nay. Members, all in favor, unmute, say aye and raise your thumb.
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Nay.
Okay, we have 3 nays. The ayes prevail. Senate File 2025 is approved to pass and will be sent to the general orders. So thank you so much, members. That concludes our meeting today. We will reconvene on Thursday. We'll see you then. Bye-bye.